Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bridge broadcast. I've got two coaches here with me, Coach Kyle and Coach Emily. We're going to kind of chat a little bit about the different mental aspects of coaching, compassion, coaching with empathy. It should be a fun conversation with the three of us. So here we go. Let's start with just a quick background of each of you, your professional background and maybe how you got involved with Bridge. And then we can kind of just throw out some other stuff. But yeah, let's start with that, kind of a quick bio, essentially.
Also, this has got to be the first all Asian American conversation.
100%.
Hey!
100%.
Right though? Don't you think, Kyle?
I think we should start off by saying our favorite traditional Asian dish from
our home culture.
So this isn't fair though, because I'm adopted and I have not had the same Asian experiences that you all have had. So
this is actually a podcast about that.
Growing up as in a suburban white neighborhood with suburban white parents.
Kyle and I also grew up in suburban white neighborhoods with half of one suburban white parent, so I feel like we can make some good connections.
That's true. There's plenty of meat there.
Oh, anyway, okay, we're introducing ourselves.
Yeah, if just like a quick bio and then maybe how you got connected with the organization.
Sure. Kyle, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So who am I talking to?
It's a conversation. It's just listen. We have 7 listeners, so I mean you could probably address them each of them by name because it's going to be Coach Maddie and
what's up, Maddie?
Yeah, exactly, and a couple of our high school girls. So I mean,
what's up, Daniela? Hey, girl.
Hey, Egypt. I haven't met you before.
You think Egypt crushes podcasts?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah,
She's
go ahead,
too
Kyle.
busy on the wall.
I hope so.
All right, guys. Yeah, my name's Kyle. I'm from Orange County, California. My first job working with kids was at the city of Laguna Niguel, and I worked at a day camp. It was a city day camp. And then ever since then, just loved working with kids. So kind of fast forward a little bit, worked with different camps throughout growing up and going through college. Started playing lacrosse in 8th grade in Dallas, Texas, and Southlake, Texas. And then kind of went back through college, went to Oklahoma State, and then also Arizona State. So kind of all over kind of the middle of the U.S. and the West Coast. Found Bridge through their Instagram page. I messaged Coach David and said, how can I get involved? Showed up to a practice at St. Philip's and really fell in love with helping the organization from there. I loved how the kids loved the game and, the family aspect. Definitely have coached for different high schools, different select programs throughout California and Texas. Bridge has been one of my favorites. Definitely love the parents also interacting with them after games and things like that. The family aspect is one of the favorite things that I love about Bridge. So that's kind of a little bio on me, how I found Bridge, and yeah.
What's your current professional job?
Right now I work for a nonprofit organization called Special Camps for Special Kids, and we run a camp called Camp John Mark. It's in Meridian, Texas, and it is for kids with chronic illnesses and special medical conditions. So I'm one of the camp directors there. So we run camp activities, we run family weekend camps, and then we run an 11-week summer camp program.
And I know we just talked about it, but do you want to kind of explain how that's going to function this year with COVID?
Yeah, so because of the medical acuity of our campers for this summer, we have decided that we are going to cancel all 11 weeks of our summer camp program for the safety of our campers. So what we'll be moving to and what we've been working on right now is a virtual camp, an online camping program that is called Camp is More Than a Place. So we're going to do different activities and live events. We're working on things like Camp in a Box that we can send out to campers. But that's something that we're working on throughout the summer. We're excited to launch it here in a few weeks.
Very cool. Coach Emily?
Cool. I'm Emily Laser, and I'm originally from the suburbs of Baltimore. So I grew up in Maryland. I'm a teacher. At a college, I did this program called ACE. That's through the University of Notre Dame. It's very similar to Teach for America. And I was sent to Jackson, Mississippi, where I taught high school. And then I went back to Notre Dame for a couple of years and worked for that teaching program. So have always worked in education. And one of my classmates from that program, Gunnar Rawlings, lives here in Dallas and is very involved in the Dallas community. And he helped start up a school called Cristo Rey Dallas in Pleasant Grove in the southeast part of the city. And we're a really neat school, high school. We're only 5 years old, and you have to qualify as low income to attend our school. And all of our students pre-COVID worked downtown 1 day a week, and that paid for 65% of their tuition. So they get a weekly corporate work study internship that pays for their tuition while getting a college prep education. So 95% of our students are the first person in their family to go to college. I work mostly with juniors and seniors there, which I love. So when I started there a couple years ago, I grew up playing lacrosse in Baltimore. Obviously, it's our big sport in Baltimore. And so I wanted to start lacrosse as a PE option on Fridays for Cristo Rey students. So Gunnar Rawlings had connected me to David, and David drove down to Pleasant Grove with a whole bunch of lacrosse sticks, balls, and some goals. And I took him to the abandoned parking lot where we were going to play some lacrosse.
It's a great space.
Yeah. And David does a really good job of like just pretending that he's going to come chat with you. But then he's like, so have you ever thought about coaching? And this is the same move we do at Cristo Rey.
Yeah.
People are like, I don't really know if I want to work at Cristo Rey. I'm like, why don't you just stop by one day?
Right.
Knowing full well that you'll just get sucked
Yep.
into it. So I stopped by St. Philip's for like a Sunday fall ball game. And there was like a 7-year-old boy who his helmet was stuck or something. And he was like, excuse me, coach, can you help me get this off my head? And I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm done for. I'm in. So coached the 3rd to 5th grade girls team for the past 2 years. Love that. I love that so much. Truly like a highlight of my life living in Dallas because I'm not from here. So that's like truly one of my highlights of moving here. And then pre-COVID was helping Jason out with the new kinder team, which is great too.
Yeah. You got basically assigned to all like the newest teams. Like every time there's a new team,
I love it.
We're just going to give them to Coach Emily. So
well, yeah. I think that when we were talking about it at first, my biggest thing was there's just no way that I'm going to leave working with high schoolers from 7:30 to 4:30 and then drive down to the field and work with more high schoolers.
Right.
So I'm like, if I'm doing this, I'm talking 5th grade and below.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about this before, but that was the same thing with Coach Maddie. She was like, I'm with 3rd graders all day teaching. Why would I come to the field and work with more 3rd graders? Like, give me the high school kids.
Yes, exactly. Just a change of pace.
Yeah. So we actually talked about that last time. It's really cool to have you guys both here because, and like I said, kind of in that intro, just having coaches who work with kids on a regular basis. So much of Bridge early on was just, trying to find kind of anyone who knew a little bit about lacrosse, right? And I think as we've evolved, we're starting to find coaches who have a lot of experience with kids specifically, and not necessarily in a coaching aspect, right? So we have a handful of teachers. We have people who maybe have a youth development or early education background. Emily, I'll throw this to you first, but as a teacher, what are some of the classroom management philosophy or style that you apply to coaching, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the basic stuff I think about, and Maddie and I have talked about this a lot too, just like the goal of giving really clear directions and having a strong voice and knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I'm sure, Kyle, you feel that same way too, because so much of running camp is that way, I'm sure too, just having a really clear direction. But I think the bigger thing from teaching that I really think about a lot with coaching with Bridge is just how important that one-on-one relationship building is with kids. So I teach 2 AP classes for juniors and seniors that are really challenging, and none of it's ever going to work unless kids feel cared for, they feel known, they feel like I'm really rooting for them, that I care about their story and I want to know more about them, and that I see the challenges of the academics as part of just the greater picture of who they are, and not that they're just like machines plowing through all this academic work for the sake of grades. And so for me, that's a lot about what I think about with teaching. And I think it is really applicable to coaching. And for me, in a personal way, lacrosse was like not a positive experience for me growing up. It was just it's such an intense part of the culture in Baltimore. And there wasn't a lot of good social, emotional moments within the way I was coached. This was also, like 90s, early 2000s. So I'm sure some of it has changed since then. And I think looking back, something I really didn't realize that was going on then was that there was, I was really oftentimes the only not just like completely white white girl on my team. And so
Yeah.
I think I didn't really realize how much that impacted my experience of playing lacrosse and like what that means for like the club lacrosse world. And I think it's changed a lot since, the mid 2000s, but for me, I just knew that was a really negative part of my experience. And so when I started coaching, it was really important to me that I think the girls in our team felt really loved and known and celebrated for who they were, and that lacrosse was one aspect of who they were, but like how good they were at the draw, or if they made a bad play or a good play, wasn't totally who they were as a person, which was very much my experience of growing up playing the sport. I think a lot about my experience of teaching and bringing that to the field, but I also think a lot about my own experience of playing lacrosse and wanting to do that a little bit differently than how I had experienced it.
Yeah. When you were growing up then playing lacrosse, then was there just not really like a recreational aspect to the sport then?
Yeah, I think what happened was I think I played rec when I was really young,
Mm-hmm.
but then you quickly get pushed into travel and club. So like even I think it's a little bit coming here in Dallas, but like in the early 2000s when I was in middle school, like it was pretty much like you're done playing rec and you're moving into club. So maybe I would have had a different experience if I hadn't switched to like the travel programs and the club programs, but it's just so much a part of the culture that you're going to be competitive about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to a high school that at that time was like winning the IAM championship and was like one or two in the nation. And I think there's so many really beautiful things about that. But for me, it wasn't really, I don't know. I don't think of it as really central to my formation during that time growing up.
Yeah.
And so a lot for a lot of our kids in Bridge, right? Like lacrosse, we're playing lacrosse because it's fun and it's a great way to have community. And yeah, like maybe you do want to play club, maybe you do want to play in college, but that can't be the end all and be all of why you play the sport. And I think as a teenager, I just kind of quickly burned out on the sport because it just always felt like such a pressure cooker. And yeah, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I haven't, to be honest, I haven't really thought about it that much because it's just so much of like what growing up in Baltimore is like.
Right.
If you go to Catholic school, if you go to prep school. But for me, it's been really important to try to it is about your skill. And there's so much in your character to learn and to grow by really honing in on your skills. There's so much character built from like getting on the wall. And I think so much about how I learned character and discipline was from lacrosse, but it can't just be about your performance and success.
Right. And we had this conversation with the coaches on the previous podcast episode of just that balance between, or maybe it's this binary argument between you can only compete and perform at a high level or you can have fun, but they don't really cross over. And it becomes really hard ground to navigate, especially for an organization like us, which really believes in rec lacrosse, but also wants to provide, like you said earlier, like competitive opportunities for kids.
Yeah. And I think as a sport, we're getting better at that because I think you have, like just recruiting at an older age, I think is a really healthy aspect of it. Like not being recruited when you're 14 or 15. Certainly. And then I think another really healthy aspect of it is I find that people in the lacrosse world are much more vocal about wanting multi-sport athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, that really wasn't part of the conversation. It was like lax or die. And I think that's kind of, I think there is a shift. I do think there's a shift within the sport to make that a little healthier, but it always is kind of it's the same thing that happens in the classroom, right? Like academic achievement and wanting to be the first person in your family to go to college is really noble and important, but it can't be the end all be all of what makes you you.
Yeah, certainly. Kyle, I want to go back and throw that question back to you.
Yeah.
Just the way you manage a camp and their interactions with kids and kind of the comparisons between that and coaching with Bridge. Obviously, the caveat being like a camp is so much different than a classroom and so much different than a lacrosse field.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of what I do is recreation, right? Coach Emily is in education. Our mission and our goals in recreation is to provide, a safe environment for kids to have fun. And that's for our camp. And that translates really closely with Bridge. Our campers at Camp John Mark, they have diversities also, right? We have kids that use wheelchairs. We have kids that, have mobility issues. We have kids that are missing limbs. So whether it's your race, your skin color, anything, physical disability, those are all diversities. Those are all differences.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things that we celebrate at our camp. And I love that that's something that we celebrate at Bridge. Yeah, it was an easy translation. And one of the things that I do at camp is I really try to think about like, what am I doing to make sure that this camper has an awesome experience this week, so that they come back, they leave camp and they say, I want to come back to that camp next summer. So the same thing with Bridge Lacrosse. I coach 3rd and 4th grade boys. My goal is not for them to win the entire season. My goal is not really to win the game that we play, but my goal is, do they want, when they graduate 4th grade, do they want to come back and play, not even at Bridge, do they want to come play lacrosse at 5th grade?
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is really just make sure they are, they have a safe environment to have fun. And that's not even just physically safe, that's emotionally safe. Like when they first start playing lacrosse and they throw the ball and it just hits the ground, and, most kids put their head down. Like, do I have a coach? Does myself, do I support them and say, hey, like, that's all right. Like, we're going to get this down. Just really just helping them out, keep their head up, and know that, it's not just playing lacrosse for 1 year, but it's really using it for a long period of time.
Yeah. Do you guys have
lots of lessons on the lacrosse field for sure.
Yeah, that's good. And I think one thing we've always talked about, and Coach Elma, you've done a really great job of helping me really define the word joy and how it applies to Bridge and how it applies to how we coach and how we work with these kids. In a classroom setting, how do you get that term joy into the classroom, right? Because it's such a different environment that in an academic setting, it's maybe a little tougher than obviously like being at a camp.
Yeah, I think one of my colleagues and I, we call it the J factor. And so we'll call them like good J factor moments. And so something we commonly talk about, which I think we do a good job at Bridge too, is just celebrating the little stuff.
Yeah.
And so nothing makes me happier than just going all out over the top for like a 3rd grader's first goal. Or just like a sick assist, like, yes. I think a big thing for us in the 3-5 space, like, cause their kids are so different developmentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between like 3rd and 5th grade is, like when one of the 5th grade girls has such a clear open shot and just make sure she has one more pass for like a littler girl.
Yeah.
So that's something I try to go big in the classroom about, is when some of our students who are more naturally gifted or academically advanced really go out of the way to bring other people up, just like making a huge deal about that one-on-one with that student, and like publicly celebrating people's growth. Yeah. And I think that has such a direct application to lacrosse, but especially little kid lacrosse.
Yeah.
Just like the first complete pass, just like losing your mind.
Yeah.
Or like just like a sweet play, like Kyle, like during a drill, and you just like throw your stick to the ground and you're like, let's go 3rd grade, So I think there's a lot of, I'm sure camp is very similar to just celebrating someone's growth, or just kind of being aware of how students, like Kyle was saying, with different abilities in different areas, like what's growth for that kid or that student, it could be so huge for them, and just paying attention enough so that when it is.
Yeah, we have a challenge course at camp, a climbing wall, and it goes up to our zip line. And our philosophy is challenge by choice. So you can choose your own challenge. So if your challenge is just to get the harness on and try on the harness, then that's your challenge. And that might as well equal to climbing all the way up the rock wall and going down the zip line, because that's your challenge. So I think Bridge really celebrates that too.
That's always been kind of one of my go-tos, is just like do the little things. And sometimes the little thing is simply, like you said, like putting the harness on and then taking the first step. But that was enough. And that was for the coaches and the teammates. And, could be, because we've done Alpine Towers in the past, and we have kids who are like, I'm not going near that thing. And you slowly get them to, I'll put 1 foot on this thing. And then that's the win. And that's it.
They always surprise themselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach Elma, with the J factor, then it's got to be harder though with high school kids, right? To really get that, energy from high school kids. I feel like it's such a difference, like celebrating a 3rd grader in like a sports environment, it's got to be different than celebrating like an A+ in like an AP history class, right? Or is there different tactics in getting the same type of response?
Yeah, I think something I've worked really hard to do in the classroom, which I think has a lot of connections to athletics as well, is celebrating non-grade related successes.
Okay.
And so I think a big thing I think a lot about is just celebrating character, and really something we talk a lot about at school is catching kids doing awesome, like catching kids just doing really good things for other people. And I like the phrase of catching them, like they weren't doing it so anyone would notice, but you just kind of happened to be in the right space, or you're walking down the hall when it happened. So a couple years ago at school, we started these shout outs for Friday morning during commuting time called Caught Being Awesome, and they're all anonymous. And something I love about that is they're like oddly specific. So like our social worker was driving behind one of our senior boys last year, and there was a man who's experiencing homelessness at the stoplight, and she had seen Brian roll down his window and talk to the man and just have this conversation. And it was just so clear that, the 17-year-old boy was not doing it because he thought anyone would notice, but but Selena put it into the the Google form, and we celebrated it on Friday. And I think it does two things. It celebrates the student, but it also, as a culture within either your school or for us, your program, it sets the tone that the little stuff really matters, and that what you do as a person and what your character is, and like these little choices of virtue are oftentimes more important than your ACT score or are the other stuff we put a ton of pressure on kids for.
Yeah.
So you go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I really like that. My headspace in terms of education is very much around like the academics and the curriculum.
Yeah. And I think it's tricky because we're a school that really cares about affording the opportunity of university for students. So that stuff does matter. That stuff's a justice issue, right? But it can't be everything. And I think the same thing for lacrosse, just making like pulling some of our girls aside and just pointing out to them when you notice them go out of their way to do something for a teammate, or when they could have gotten frustrated and given up and they didn't, and just pulling them aside and letting them know you noticed it happening, and just being like, I'm so impressed by you. I'm so proud of you for doing that. It's so cool to see that happen. Or I remember last season that would have bothered you so much and you would have given up, and you didn't give up. Like, look how much you've grown.
Yeah.
So just kind of setting aside that time to celebrate students one-on-one. And kids kind of make fun of me at school because I'm just so intense all the time. And I think I'm kind of similar when talking to little girls. Yeah. I'm just like, you know what? Like this next drill, Val, you should go left. And she's like, Coach Emily, I can't go left. And I'm like, what happens if you go left and you drop it? Like, will the world end? And everyone's like, you need to really chill out. But I'm like that too in school too. I'm like, what if you choose the harder thesis? Like, imagine the new ideas that could come into the world. Like, just kind of going like all out for the goofiest stuff. But I'm sure both of you relate to this in a deep way too, is that that's got to be genuine, because like adolescents just smell phoniness like to their bones. Like, we'll call you out for your BS. So I think anyone who works in youth development or education, you kind of have to know your brand and who you are, and kind of like where your gifts lie, and like what you can lean into, and kind of what's not really your thing. Like, I love watching Maddie coach and teach, because it's just, it's different. Like, we have different styles, and I think it's really cool to remember that kids need and they deserve different types of leaders. Like Kyle is just like a child whisperer, and I'm just like, you know what I mean? Like a kid's like having a meltdown, and Kyle's like,
absolutely.
Hey, let's just talk about this real quick. And I go over to the same kid and I'm like, here's the deal. I understand that you're upset. I need you to pace 6 steps, like, But I think a lot about in the classroom and on the field, kids need different types of teachers and coaches. They need a diversity of that type of mentorship too.
Going to Kyle then, because you are the third, fourth grade whisperer, especially when you've got that orange bucket. It flips over, you sit down, they're seated. It's a nice little like group huddle, and they're very attentive. I mean, is that a skill set that is, how have you developed that skill set, or just are you that good with like little kids?
No, like honestly, the third, fourth grade age group, that's not our age group at camp. Like we don't even have kids that age. We don't have them that young sometimes. I think just over the years of working at Bridge, I think I've just built that camaraderie with the kids, and I don't know. I think it's just wash, rinse, repeat, and it's a lot of fun. It's so much fun. I always check myself and say, hey, like, am I having fun doing this too?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, cause I want to have fun doing it. So,
Coach Kyle, how, and I know you said earlier that you don't have maybe the same sort of connection with your kids, obviously outside of camp. How do you think some of your kids are doing, or maybe ones that you can remember? How do you think they're doing right now?
Yeah, I think about the campers and their connections and the relationships that they make at camp they're so life-changing, right? Our tagline for our camp is inspiring confidence for life. So it's not going to camp and just playing, have fun, having fun, doing the activities. It's meeting that other kid that also uses a wheelchair. Because, like, and I've talked with you about this, David, right? Like, if they go to school, they might be the only kid that has spina bifida, and they're the only kid with a green wheelchair. But when they go to camp, there's 120 kids that use wheelchairs, and there's 30 of them that have the same green wheelchair. It's just wild. And that's where they get to, like, make those connections, make those relationships. And they go beyond camp, and they're, you can find stuff online. Like, we have kids groups, they're doing like wheelchair dance competitions and, all their adaptive sports. And it's really cool. And it goes across the realm, right? We have oncology camp, we have asthma camp, we have muscular dystrophy. We serve the realm.
Without camp and that opportunity, like you said, to be around people who are like them or there's some commonality, what kind of toll do you think that takes on a lot of the kids?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot, right? So we're really sending out messages, we're sending out videos that are really supporting the campers. And it might not be very different for some campers. I mean, I think of some of our campers with muscular dystrophy. They may be inside and, on a screen for a fair amount of the day, and that's their normal life. But we're really just trying to send messages and videos and from their doctors, their nurses, familiar faces, just to get that familiarity of camp to them, because they can't come to camp. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Emily, same question. How are your kids doing?
Yeah, we're really lucky. Like I was telling you earlier, that we have 45-minute classes every day. So students for at least 3 or 4 periods, seeing like 19 to 25 other of their classmates, and then checking in with that teacher. But it's been really hard on students. We're pretty lucky at our school that we have a really robust counseling program. Mm-hmm. So a lot of students are continuing check-ins and counseling virtually. But something a lot of the teachers and I have been discussing is just using that first 5 to 10 minutes of every class for some sort of check-in. So everybody does it a little bit differently. So I do like a series of 5 to 7 questions at the beginning of class, and I make them different every day, and you can answer any of them. And some of them are really goofy and some of them are more serious. Mm-hmm. But it's led to a lot of really good conversations. And I think students are able to see other students open up about how this time is particularly hard for them and hard for their family. So it kind of liberates other kids to speak about that too. And then half of my job is in academic support, so helping students with their grades and their academic plans. And so most of the afternoons, I just have half-hour check-ins with students, and just making sure that the academic check-ins start with a personal check-in around mental health and around how you're taking care of yourself, and setting goals for your classes, but also setting goals for what you're going to do that day or that week to make sure that you're taking care of yourself during this time. And something we're all trying to talk about is it's really weird to ask a student to write a research paper during a global pandemic and to act like it's really important. But it's a hard balance. I keep saying to students, it's a really tricky balance of giving yourself grace for not being able to do what you want to do and not be able to be as productive as you think you can be, while also holding yourself accountable to some type of normalcy and to protect your, the dreams that you have for the future when life goes back to quote unquote normal. So it's a really tricky balance of, like pulling on both sides of that dynamic.
Right. Are you getting, for the most part, are you getting pretty authentic responses from your kids? And because that's a tough age group to pull, to get information that, is for a lot of kids, puts them in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah. A big thing we talk a lot about at school is making sure that every kid has one adult they feel like they can confide in, or that's their person in the building. And so between faculty and staff, just really making sure that every kid's checked in on in some way. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of the quarantine, at the beginning of when we started shelter in place, every staff member had a list of families that they would call and check in on. So to talk about like food needs or medical needs, but to also just check in on how the student's doing. So talking to the student and their parent. Something I love is that one of our 11th grade English teachers, once a week, she has every student fill out a Google form, and they have to rank how they're doing from 1 to 5. And she has the descriptions of like what 1 to 5 means. And she says, do you want someone to check in with you this week? And who do you want it to be? And so it's really cool because she'll just send you an email and she'll say, David put that he would love for you to check in with him sometime this week. He knows you're going to send a Google Calendar invite to him. So it's been really cool that she's put that in their court, because a lot of kids are like, I think I'm good. Like, I don't need to check in. Like, I'm talking to my siblings a lot. Like, I'm talking to my friends a lot. But some kids that I would never expect to like see me as their person they want to check in with have put me. And that's been really cool. And I'm really proud of them too for like, I'm really proud of 17-year-old boys being like, hey, like I really need help with my mental health.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely in a time and in a place where that's shifting and that it's becoming more normalized to self-advocate for yourself for your mental health.
It's been kind of a struggle with us because we're not an education nonprofit. We're not a sort of first response. And so things like food needs, economic security, mental health, your lacrosse coach is not always going to may not be like the top of the list of someone you'd reach out to. And so with Bridge, we're kind of having a little trouble inquiring about the needs and the challenges of a lot of families.
I know, and it's also tricky just to know what the impact that you have of doing the normal things that you're doing. So like posting the workouts or having the Zoom calls or having guest speakers or, guest players come in and talk about, their own career. I think kids at this time are really grateful for that level of normalcy and for that interruption in the day, which it's not perfect human interaction, but it's way more than maybe what you're getting during the rest of the day. So I think it's tricky too. I think, like sport can play a really interesting role in this time of just providing that normalcy. Like I love that you can get on a brick wall right now.
Yeah.
And that's like a part of our sport. Yeah.
It is something that with all the stuff that we put out there, it's something we want to do for the kids to have some consistency and have, again, like everyone's been saying, that sort of sense of normalcy. But in a lot of ways, because we know that a lot of our kids come from challenging backgrounds, it doesn't feel like enough, and I sort of feel there's a little bit of guilt of like, well, listen, I mean, it's super easy for me to say, hit the wall and here's a Zoom call we'll set up and we'll do a trivia night, in a week or two. So I feel isolated in terms of, I think there's more I could do because I see all the needs and communities that the three of us are very familiar with. It's definitely tough. And Kyle, I don't know if you maybe share that a little bit too, of just, it's tough to be in a position at home and want to help kids in a way that you're so used to doing.
Yeah. I mean, my job is outdoor recreation. We have our campsite is 200 acres, 2 hours south of Dallas. I love being outside, and now being inside for so long, it's definitely a change. And it's difficult to program that into, our online programming, right? Like we're a nature-based facility. How do we bring that, that nature on the screen? So it's but we're also a creative organization, right? So camp people are very creative. So I have as I'm sitting here probably making a teddy bear zip line and making the best of our moment. So I'm a firm believer that camp people will bring camp people to campers.
That's true. Camp people are their special breed of creatives.
They are.
Sure.
They are. So camp people will deliver.
I was going to say, David, that does make sense that's confusing, because I think that is kind of the unique role of Bridge, is that it's not just about lacrosse. And this is a really weird time in human history to figure out like what role would something like Bridge play during this time. Like it makes sense that our school has a weekly food pantry for families like that. I don't know, people see schools as being responsive to, needs in that way, but it's trickier when you think of like no one really thinks of there's athletics as like that's the role that they play.
Our mission is very specific, right, to youth development and obviously food access and jobs and things like that. Those are very specific needs that we'll never go into. So I do feel fortunate that it seems like a lot of families do have access to those resources or access to organizations that can help them with those things. But it reminds me that lacrosse is really, in the long run, is really not that important, right? It's the individual relationships we have. It's caring and compassion for kids. It's having empathy for kids. You just don't really have the same medium to have those relationships via Zoom. And so there is kind of almost this helplessness aspect to, well, I can kind of keep you guys entertained with this or that, but clearly there are other things going on. And that's tough. I think that's tough for a lot of organizations right now who have just trying to have to, like Kyle, like you said, just having to adapt quite a bit and be creative and evolve.
Yeah.
I want to pivot a little bit, and I feel like maybe we're jumping around, but I think that's okay. Bridge has been adapting and evolving in a lot of ways, and we've talked more about moving away from lacrosse as kind of that focal point and into, again, the relationships that we have. And in that evolution came social emotional learning. That's been an aspect of Bridge that's, it's sort of tip of the iceberg. But how do you guys see SEL playing into sports? Because one thing that I'm learning about the SEL space is it does seem to be very classroom centric. Educational nonprofits, schools, systems, districts, they're the ones really pushing and becoming sort of the environment for SEL. How have you guys seen that play into sports and maybe even your team specifically?
Coach Emily?
I was about to say Coach Kyle.
Sorry, I maybe I should prompt you guys or send notes ahead of time, but
No, you're good.
I can take your time. I can edit this.
I mean, we definitely have lots of ideas here, but it's hard to kind of pinpoint it. And I think it's tricky because I think one of the reasons I love Bridge so much, and I think the same with Kyle too, is it's so different than coaching with like I would never coach lacrosse somewhere else. Like, it's just, it's just like, I love lacrosse. And I think lacrosse is such a great outlet for our teams, but like, I would never be like, okay, sorry, David, I'm going to go move to the Highland Park program. Because I think there's a really cool thing we have going on when it comes to youth development and caring about our kids and the teams in a different way. But I'm just thinking through what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's tough.
Kyle, I think you're the same way too. I think you feel the same way. Like, Kyle, you could easily coach some high school team in some program. And in many ways, like, you have the experience to coach high school. Like, that's kind of what it makes sense for you to do. But I love that you're like, no, I want to coach third grade Bridge.
Do you think do you think some of that motivation to do so is partly because of the challenges that a lot of our families face, or the needs that aren't being addressed in some of these neighborhoods versus neighborhoods like the suburbs or Highland Park or private schools then?
No, I mean, I think it's more, I mean, it's just love of the game and wanting to share that game with anyone. I mean, if there was a program like Bridge anywhere else in the country, wherever I was living, like, if it was in any kind of area, I would be in.
Yeah.
It's because I love lacrosse and I want to share that to kids that, normally, society might say, like, sorry, like, yeah, maybe lacrosse is not for you. Maybe it's not a fit.
Right.
Well, I was talking to Matt.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I was talking to Mac's mom about this once, and she was saying, she's like, this has to be the most diverse lacrosse program in, like, anywhere. And so I think about that a lot with I think about our 3rd to 5th grade team last year. It was like a third Caucasian, a third African-American, a third Hispanic. And then their coaches were both Asian.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the social emotional magic of Bridge too, is that you have kids from all different schools all over Dallas, mostly, in the southern half, just because of like how we organize it regionally or whatever. But you have kids from all different backgrounds, all different schools. Very rarely, until you get to the older schools where like Irma or Barack Obama are kind of like have a history there. Very rarely in the younger grades do any of the kids know each other outside of lacrosse.
Right.
And so I think there's kind of a magic in it too. It's like, this has got to be one of the few places in the city of Dallas where kids who go to tons of different schools, who have different racial, religious backgrounds, are all playing the same, like, kind of obscure sport that is mostly played by like upper middle class white people in the Mid-Atlantic. It's like very bizarre. It's a very bizarre dynamic.
And
but
not even like a sport either. Like, there's not even like groups or organizations or recreational areas that bring that kind of a hodgepodge together.
Yeah. No schools are not like that. Yeah. I think of one of the first practices I ever went to with Bridge. I remember this, it was Valentine's Day. And so Coach Peyton and I had done like these like fun Valentine's Day gifts for the girls, but it was also Ash Wednesday.
That's right.
So I'm a Catholic and I have just like a huge ash cross on my forehead. And then all the Hispanic girls also have it. So we all get to practice. And then I remember Karis looked at me and she's like, Coach Emily, what's on your face? And so then Val is like, oh, Coach Emily, you Catholic? And I was like, yes, I'm Catholic. Are you Catholic? She's like, we're going after this to Mass. So I think that just made me think a lot about my own, like, when I was brought up too, like, how often was I in like a sporting space with girls of all different backgrounds, like talking about religious diversity? Like, I think just the sheer diversity of the program lends itself to having really meaningful conversations around how we celebrate one another, how we accept one another, or how we ask questions of one another and be curious and care for one another in a way that's like respectful and loving. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think that's good. I like that because it's very unintentional, but the outcomes are
Yeah.
something we could have never planned for, right? Kyle, what about you in terms of like your 3-4 boys? It's certainly not as diverse as maybe Coach Emily's team, but they also don't know each other. They come from different backgrounds, schools, neighborhoods. Do you see some of that gelling or some of the shared experiences and different experiences?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, that's an awesome age group, and I'm their lacrosse coach, but I think all of the Bridge Lacrosse coaches are more than just a lacrosse coach. They're like a life coach. So
Yeah.
like, it's not just teaching those kids how to pick up a ground ball, how to shoot the lacrosse ball or pass the lacrosse ball. Like, I'm going to teach them how to be friends. I'm going to teach them how to be kind to each other. I'm going to teach them how to show empathy for whenever their player falls down or misses a shot or something like that. And that's something that they can take far beyond the lacrosse field.
Your 3-4 boys are fun to watch in that there is a nice balance between, like I said earlier, like competing, and you have kids who like really want to win, and you have kids like Manuel who are just like, they just want to be outside. Coach Emily's
I
face.
gave a game ball to, it was Amari. I gave a game ball. This was one of the last games that we played before we got shut down with COVID. And I gave the game ball to Amari because one of the other players fell down on the field and he went out of his position to go help him up.
Oh,
I love it. That's awesome.
I was like, it's yours. Game
Yeah,
ball is
that's
yours.
very game ball worthy.
Yeah.
yeah. Not when, dads from a suburban team are yelling at you and you're in fourth grade. Like, how do you handle that? That's a Bridge Lacrosse learning experience if I ever saw one.
Yeah, you can't teach that. So that's something that is just, with time is taught. I coached at a high school in Orange County, California, and when I had a meeting with the parents and they said, what are your intentions with the team this year? And I was a new coach. This is my first time coaching at a high school. I said, well, first of all, like, I'm going to help your boys be young gentlemen, and then they're going to play lacrosse. I'll teach them lacrosse.
Yeah.
So, starting as a person, and then going lacrosse, and that's what Bridge is all about, right?
Do you think we do that terribly intentional, or is that just the natural culture of our organization?
I guess that's just a good selection of coaches that you pick.
Or maybe people who want to coach, you would want to coach with Bridge if you care about that kind of stuff.
I think we asked Coach Jack this. What is it about Bridge where we get these coaches where we're like, oh, you're going to be just fine. Like, if you're willing to reach out and take the time to work with kids like that are part of Bridge, we know the type of coach you're going to be, and you're in.
Yeah. And I also think this is a shout out to you, David. I think you model that really well. And when you're a new coach, like, I just remember, when I started 2 years ago, like, just not really knowing what I was getting into and showing up at practice, but you model that really well. And the way that you speak to the kids and like really make sure you know kids' names, even no matter how big it is. Like, I think that is modeled really well too. So when you're a new coach, you come in and, you're doing that, David, then all the other coaches do it too. It's like really helpful. Mm-hmm. It's kind of enculturated. And so it's really modeled well for you when you're new, I think.
I appreciate that. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm always as present in terms of how we sort of onboard coaches, because like you said earlier, it was like, I'm going to bring you to the field and then basically just tell you you're coaching for Bridge and then throw you kind of into, like, there has been kind of a throw you into the deep end of the pool mentality sometimes.
Yeah. And a lot of the Bridge coaches, like, they take the younger Bridge coaches or the newer Bridge coaches under their wing, right? If I see a new Bridge coach, I'm gonna teach them the Bridge way, and I'm gonna help them out. So, and it just keeps trickling down, further and further. I think what's great also is, we have coaches that don't have lacrosse backgrounds. I have Coach Terry. He's a basketball coach and a Bridge parent, and he is a lacrosse coach now.
He rules.
Yeah, absolutely. We love Coach Terry.
He can coach lacrosse because he's a coach, and he coaches the kids first.
Yeah.
And then coaches lacrosse after that. But yeah.
I don't know.
I strung him up a stick. I taught him ground balls.
He's awesome.
He's the best.
I was going to say, David, I don't know if this is unique to us, but I feel like the older kids are always hanging around. And like, something I love over the past 2 years is just the older kids helping with the little guys.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a good part of the culture too, is like just forcing Andrew to teach like 5-year-old boys how to pass. And Andrew's like, Coach, I'm like, just walk up, you can do it. And just like forcing.
Oh, and
like,
I love,
like forcing kids forcing the JV boys to like help with line drills for
Yeah.
kindergartners. And I think that's part of it too, is maybe like the family aspect of it. I think helps a lot if you're maybe playing for a bigger program in the area. Like, I don't know if you necessarily know the kindergartners.
Yeah, let's see. How else are we awesome, guys?
I was just about to say we have to be careful in this conversation.
I know.
As someone who, like, I'm sure you're the same way, Kyle. Like, as someone who works for a nonprofit and you really believe in what you do, you can't turn a blind eye to the ways in which you could be better at things, because you know, we're having this conversation, and then then like when we go back for next season, one of the high school boys is just like pushing something.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
I think that's where Summer Academy comes into play, where I'm like, oh, okay, right, we're not hitting on all the chords here with these kids.
That's so true. And nothing like a middle school boy just like being mean to me and making fun of me to be like, oh, I hate Bridge.
Yeah. Or, we do average one fist fight a camp. So
and the root causes are usually like dehydration and sleepiness.
Right, exactly. These kids
camp
won't go to sleep on time.
Tired and hungry.
Hot, tired, and hungry.
So I don't have anything else I really wanted to prompt you guys with. I think a lot of this conversation was it was just kind of that next level into coaching and how we work as like compassionate coaches, and how we think about whether it's mental health, whether it's like social emotional. It's, maybe less like the coaching philosophies and X's and O's. And I thought you two were perfect for it because of your backgrounds and just the depth that you have working with kids from like such a wide like range.
This has been the first meeting of the Asian American Lacrosse Coaches Union. I'm excited when we get our union cards.
Oh gosh, you sound like Jason.
I know.
It's wearing on the rest of y'all. We should have called in Coach Karam and Coach Nick.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Statistically, it's got to be very strange to have 4 Filipino coaches in Southern Dallas.
I played hockey and lacrosse. Those are like so far from.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I was a hockey and lacrosse. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys doing this. A lot of fun and just like really great insight and really great feedback. Yeah.
So good, guys.